Welcome to episode 19, Construction Nation. This is Sue Dyer, your host of the Construction Dream Team, where I interview industry leaders and experts so you can learn how to build your project so that you have a construction dream team based on OPE, other people's experiences. So why not accelerate your success by learning from others who've already been there and done that? I am really excited to have a Construction Dream Team LinkedIn group. I hope that you will jump on over there and join. As I've been doing these interviews, I realize that it's great to talk to all these experts, but we don't have the opportunity to ask questions or have a dialogue. So on the LinkedIn group, it'll be a place where the experts will join me and they will answer questions, and I will be there as well, and you jump in and we will all be able to talk to each other. So LinkedIn will be Construction Dream Team LinkedIn, or we'll have a web page that you can easily access this at cdtlinkedin.com. So get on over there. Okay, so today our guest is one of my absolute most favorite people in the whole wide world, Geoff Neumayr. He serves as the Chief Development Officer at San Francisco International Airport. He is currently leading a $7 billion construction program, and they're using the progressive design build model. This process was really articulated, developed at SFO. So Geoff is really an expert in this. And I thought it would be so great for him to share some of his ideas and concepts with Construction Nation. He is a member of the Design Build Institute of America Executive Board, and he's going to be their president in 2020. So I hope all of you will cheer him on in that role. He also serves on the board of the International Partnering Institute. He was selected as one of ENR's top 25 newsmakers in 2016. He holds a BS from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and is a civil licensed engineer and a structural engineer. Welcome, Geoff, to Construction Dream Team.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you, Sue, for having me. I'm excited about what we can share here today with everybody.
Me too. So I always like to start by having everyone understand a little bit about your journey on how you've gotten to be here with a $7 billion program and as the Chief Development Officer here at SFO.
It's kind of an interesting journey. I've meandered a lot of different paths to get to this role. It actually started in college. Most people know that I've shared this, but not everybody knows that I actually started off as an architecture major. Got to the third year, was still very much interested in structural engineering. Took on and decided to look in and explore architectural engineering, which is the structural side of architecture, but I stayed in the same college and began to explore the engineering side. So what's interesting is that having completed the third year of design in architecture, as well as completing my structural engineering undergraduate work, at that point in time, I began to really have a true understanding of how art, design, and architecture and engineering all come together. And that gave me the first flavor of what it means to work together as a team. Out of school, my first job was working for a Watry Design Group, which was an architecture engineering firm. I wonder why that happened. And did a lot of exploration. And one of the things along that journey with that firm is we started to do design build projects throughout. And most of these were related to park structure, but I became very much intrigued with the idea of the concept of the design and build team being one team to the owner. And that really was different than the traditional approach of where you had to go out and get a separate contract with an owner, and then they would pull the drawings away from you and go out and get a bid, and then you had to live with the consequences of that. And it always felt like you didn't have that relationship with the builder. It was just purely adversarial. So I kind of had that feeling of what it was like to be a consultant, and I always remembered that. But I also became intrigued with the idea of, wouldn't it be cool to be more of the centerpiece of representing owners and how to facilitate this process, maybe better than what I had seen. And so then I moved on to with the Allen Group and spent almost 15 years working as an owner's representative or advisor, if you will, through different processes, including here at San Francisco International Airport. And along that journey, I was a consultant to the airport and worked on their first progressive design build project, the Secure Connector, and then the follow-on project, which was the Terminal 2 project. And both those projects were a huge success. And it was really fun to be an advisor to the airport to help them begin to develop something that little did we know was going to become an extraordinary model in terms of how we could approach integrated project delivery. It was upon completion of the Terminals 2 project that I was given the opportunity to join the airport. And after really pondering that and thinking, gosh, wouldn't that be really, really neat to be able to really take something and continue to do something that through my whole journey really had prepared me to really do, because I'd understand I really had a real empathy about bringing builders, designers, and owners and stakeholders all together so that they were working as one team and not working in separate silos. And so that was very interesting. But also along that journey, I began to learn the role of where partnering plays in. By the way, that role goes all the way back to the days of when I was with Autry and I first met Sue. I believe it was 1990 on a project over in Oakland when I was actually
post office project.
The post office project. That was a very intriguing aspect of that journey. Now, once I completed that project, I didn't really see partnering until almost 6 years later again, and Sue went and had made it even bigger. But it was another one of those little things that went in my bag, but didn't really know what it was and didn't know how it would all fit into the idea of integrated project delivery. But during the journey here through our capital program, once I was offered the job to become an associate deputy director and eventually the chief development officer, got the opportunity to put all the pieces together. And I began to realize, too, that there was no single piece that really solved the problem with the integrated project delivery, but that we did have a number of issues. And so the journey led me to kind of reconnect all these dots and put them together and understand that you have to have a contracting strategy that allows people to develop their journey, if you will, and be able to use that collective wisdom to really understand what the commercial terms should be and help create them and then finalize them. But I also realized that putting people into a safe environment in a relationship-based contracting strategy can also create chaos, and it does, and hence why we need to bring partnering into it, because chaos a lot of times is first interpreted as a bad thing and as a negative thing, and can actually create adversarial relationships as well during that process. And so partnering becomes the glue that helps align that. And Sue always talks about the effects of entropy and how we try to make sure that we don't lose a whole lot of things along the way, but we channel all those little energies into the funnel at the end. And that's kind of what we're doing as we go through that process. And that safe environment allows all these collective thoughts to come to the surface, but they've all now got to be organized in the same direction. And so hence the partnering part comes into it. I think that the last part that's began to really intrigue me in all this too is we have to think about better ways of managing, and that's where the lean construction comes into the journey here as well. And that doesn't play into the contracting strategy, and it does not necessarily play into helping people realize the positive in a difficult journey that they're going through the program phase. But what it does do is when it's time to execute, it helps eliminate the waste. It helps us really understand that we're not wasting each other's time, that we're doing things once, not twice. And that also has a huge impact on the way people behave. So you move across from a very iterative process to a process that wants to be linear. And it's interesting, is in the iterative process, you have to protect the iterative process of design. For new construction, you have to protect now the linear process of construction. And so that's kind of where these two things play into it. And so under the progressive design build model, it's been easy to capture all three of these things at the appropriate time and blend these things all together to really form a truly integrated delivery model that really focuses not on time and on budget, but on outcomes of projects, whatever those may be. We, like here at SFO, like them to be exceptional project outcomes, which I think everybody else does too. But that's been kind of the journey how I got here.
So a lot of people would say that they would be happy if their projects were on time and on budget. That would be like a miracle for them. So what can you say about helping teams that are in that space to move along towards becoming more integrated?
And it's really an interesting conversation to have, but it depends upon where you want to place the bar and what you determine success to look like. And that's where you have to have an honest discussion with people. The reason why people would say on time and on budget as measure that as success is out of fear of litigation. So if they avoid litigation, that's what they're really considering success. But if we eliminate that aspect of the equation, which we've done a very good job in partnering, even on the on time, on budget side, and you deliver something on time and on budget, you no longer have that fear of litigation. So there's going to be less interest in being on time and on budget because you start to see the possibilities of extraordinary. And now we can re-explore again. And I think as we reset the norm of extraordinary looks not staying out of litigation, but extraordinary looks like LEED Platinum buildings, totally resilient buildings, facilities that bring smiles to people's faces, things that enhance education, our passengers and having a wonderful experience here at the airport as they go on their journeys all over the world. Those will redefine as success, and we'll move past the on time and on budget, because when we realize is that when we change those attitudes about these more grand ideas, on time and on budget actually becomes fairly easy to do. It becomes a no-brainer at that point. I'm not saying it diminishes the importance of it, and I'm not saying it diminishes the difficulty of it, but it becomes something that just becomes a natural outcome of seeking something extraordinary. And so what happens is, as you go through this process, is you would ask, as you see what extraordinary looks like, just being on time, on budget, and if you just did that, you're going to feel kind of gypped a little bit because there is nothing else at the end. And you go, I could have done so much better. So there's a big difference between I didn't get sued and I could have done so much better. Well, our industry is moving towards I could have done better. And
sounds like a project that, from a people side, I'd much rather be on a project where they're looking at what's possible as opposed to how do we prevent fighting with each other.
And that's where we're headed with in our industry. I'm not saying it's completely there, but as that paradigm begins to shift and what's possible becomes the measure of success, we can really begin to raise the bar.
I see an awful lot of people out there on projects that are really not enjoying the process. And for me, like, construct, what could be more fun than building something, thinking it up and building it? But for, I would say, the majority of people still today, it's not so fun. So progressive design build, let's learn more. So, tell us, Geoff, a little bit about your thoughts on how someone could begin to approach progressive design build. What would be the first steps that they should be taking to maybe think about implementing this process?
Well, one thing about progressive design build is that it is not something that should be attempted by everybody. You have to really ask yourself the question as an individual, particularly as an owner, do I really want to get to a better place? Do I really want to do something more? That's one step you've got to get over. But the other thing, too, is that if you expect people to go into an environment where you can integrate and work as one team and be collaborative, you actually have to have your organization internally be that way as well. The idea is that people will follow your lead. And so if that's not in a good place, it's something you need to look at yourself internally, fix, and get right. And that's, again, where you can use partnering, for example. It's something well before we even talk about contracting strategies, but you work on that layer that makes an internal partnering or partnered alignment with internally. Because until you get that part first fixed, really don't try it. It won't work. I think the second stage is once we've got internally your alignment of your organization together, what you're really saying to the design build world now is we want you to come work for us, but we want to be engaged partners in this now. Meaning that we're going to allow our stakeholders now become engaged in the process. That's a double-edged sword because the good news is the stakeholders are going to be involved from the very beginning. Bad news is the stakeholders are going to be involved from the very beginning. What I mean by the good news is you're going to get the collective wisdom, which is very powerful, and that's great, but that's a lot of people, a lot more chaos now that you have to put together. and a lot more people too that can get hurt along the way. And so you have to relook at your management strategies, and you have to relook and see what are those tools you're using to measure success. And in the past, we used to wait till problems evolve and then begin to solve them. And it's too late because people start to get hurt once a problem is happened. We pretend like somehow when somebody tells somebody that a problem exists, like it's a big aha moment. But the thing about a problem is everybody already knows it. So one could say, oh yeah, the collective wisdom can call it out. It doesn't even need to be called out. It's already known. Everybody might be silent on the issue, but it's already out there. And the reason why is because the damage has already been done. But what we have to do is begin to learn to understand that we have to have tools that help us identify issues. And you might say, oh, issues, problems, same thing. No, they're not. They look a lot like each other in terms of when you first call them out. But the difference is, as I mentioned, is a problem everybody already knows about. Issues are usually just in certain people's heads, but not the entire team. And there's one other big difference. A problem, people have already been hurt. Emotions have gone off, people are out of money, schedule's been lost, something bad has happened already. That's why it's become a problem in a crisis situation. Issues on the surface in terms of discussing what the issue is will come out just like a problem, but the difference is it's something that hasn't happened yet and nobody's been hurt. But they're in people's heads and they're not known by everybody, and there becomes the trick part, which means we have to trust each other. Hence why you have to develop an organization that can be trusting, but then have your design build teams come on and they can see how you interact within yourselves. They will participate in that. That'll help get these issues to the table. That's, you might ask, well, why is that so important to get people to behave in the world of issues? Let's just wait till the problems. Is that because nobody's been hurt in the world of issues, you can begin to generate habits in a non-adversarial relationship that's safe once you know what the issues are. What's weird about it is once the first issue comes, there still might be 100 more that still haven't surfaced. But you have an opportunity to handle that issue the correct way with each other. And then the second, third, and fourth one will begin to pop out. And it'll manifest itself into something humongous. And those issues then are being dealt with in advance of becoming problems. The reason why I believe that if you take the first issue that comes up and how you handle it is everything is there's a video out there that's playing this music and a bunch of people on a park side. And nothing happens for a very long time until the first person steps up. Not that that's that big a deal and they start to dance. And that's not a super big deal in itself because nothing really happens after that. But the second person who's watching that then gets up and has the courage to work it because it's safe to get up now. It's an explosion after that. So it's only after somebody voluntarily gets up that a second person does and then everybody does. Well, the same thing with issues is that we can get the second people to voluntarily step up, and then the third, fourth, and fifth will happen, and we've got it all together. With problems, if we wait till there's problems, all that's going to happen is we're going to punish somebody because we're going to figure out who is at fault. Well, there's no way you're going to get any issues out on the table. Now, I think it's important that we not be naive enough that problems aren't going to occur. They are. But what happens is if you work predominantly in the world of issues, that's the norm of how you solve things. And so when a problem comes up, you will deal with it the same way you did an issue. Because you know it's safe and you know it works. And the team has developed that trust. Versus the old adage, if we wait for a problem, you might say, well, I will solve the problem just the way we did it, solved our issues. Well, no, you won't. You will solve the problem the same way you handle litigation because of the way the continuum works. So if our projects are always headed for disputes and adversarial relationships, and that's what we're always practicing, waiting for the problems to happen. When the problems hit, you have no choice but to go back to those norms. But if we develop our norms in the world of issues, we'll solve problems just like we solve issues. It's kind of like your norm is going to be one up the continuum, if you will. So
if I'm a project manager on a project and say it's design build, what can I do to develop trust? Because you keep talking about developing trust. And so it makes sense to me, need to develop trust. What can I do to help get the trust level up so that the issues can be known?
let's step back, and this is a little bit maybe, and try to define what trust is. And one of the things that I like to look at to kind of explain these value systems of why we have certain values is to look at the opposite of what trust is. And so I think if we try to define trust and define it, we're going to struggle a little bit. But if we can define what it doesn't look like, maybe that makes it a little bit easier. And so if you try to define what the opposite of trust would be, it isn't going to be untrust or distrust, right? That's too easy. Go deeper than that. I think what we're really going to find out is that the opposite of trust is fear. So if you're a project manager and you want to build that trust, what's really good is to look around and take time to observe and say, what are people afraid of? And then help remove that fear. And you take the lead to make it go away. What's interesting, if you make it go away, that's how trust gets built. In other words, if you deal with the opposite and know what it looks like, you can make it go away because others observe that you know what it is, but they can also define what trust is because they're seeing it happen right in front of them. So the idea is locate fear, the opposite side of it, and make it go away, and all you have left is trust. And the entire team will become evident of what trust is, and it'll feel good because they know what fear feels like. And we know trust feels a lot better than fear, so make it go away. Because everybody already knows what fear is.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Absolutely. And it's something everyone could work towards.
Yeah.
There's not anyone out there at any level that couldn't do that within their sphere.
Yeah. And just take one at a time, because people will see it, and it begins to build on itself, and other people begin to do the same thing. But it really is not placing the blame on anybody or looking what's at fault, but it's really removing the fear.
Can you give us some examples of real life things that have happened on projects as a result of this approach?
I think one of the best examples that we eventually got over here at SFO over a long period of time was that a simple thing could happen is that everybody obviously sees a change that has to be made. And so it was really easy just to write a change order and say, okay, go do this for X price. And that's given to somebody. And then somebody that somebody or subcontractor doesn't start to do the work. And we start to say, but I told them to do the work. They should just get doing it. They were told contractually, I already gave you the change order. Well, it's really easy to say, well, they're just not doing the work because they don't want to do it, or something else, or they're just doing that because they didn't get enough money of what they wanted to do. Well, what's interesting is that we've been able at the airport to step back and say that that's not really why they don't want to do the work. They're really afraid they're not going to get paid within a month of the work getting done. And the reason why they're fearful of that was because it took months on end to negotiate and perfect a change order. And so there was fear to ever get started because they never knew if they were just going to get, it wasn't about how much it was going to be, but it was about how they could get paid immediately after they did some of the change work. That was the actual fear. It wasn't the fear even over getting the final price or having a fair. It wasn't even about that. It was a simple thing like that. And so by stating to everybody, hey, we're going to give you a partial and we'll pay you as a percentage of whatever change comes up, or you did that particular month and you include it on the next pay application, you eliminate the fear of somebody. Now, of course, you have to execute on that. And so when somebody does the change work that's been given to them, they're given a partial amount that they can actually charge against and bill for that next month, and they get paid. You can imagine what that does the next time you issue a change is people want to work on things they get paid on, and they'll gladly do it.
And what about extraordinary results? The teams that have gotten to the point where they are focused on exceptional. What are some exceptional results you've seen from teams?
Well, we can go back to, I think, just simple thing like the air traffic control tower. this was a one-of-a-kind project that had to be designed to a seismic standard where the FAA could occupy this tower after a major earthquake. The team looked at numerous alternatives to try to make that behavior happen. And out of that, because they were given a time frame where they could dream big but not be rushed to a single conclusion, but they were trusted that they would come up with something different, they did. And the extraordinary results was a post-tension, vertical post-tension structure that is a one-of-a-kind, tallest one in the United States, that satisfied the criteria beyond what the FAA could even imagine. But that never would have been possible if the engineers weren't trusting of the airport to go take a risk on a different way of doing business, and actually were compensated to do more analysis, right? Because it required more money for them to do this. But in the end, what we got was something that was extraordinary from a behavior during a seismic event. And one could say we might have paid more money up front, but we actually got a more economical seismic system even out of it. So we won on both sides of the equation. But none of this would have happened if they did not trust the airport from the very beginning that they would be compensated for their time to explore.
And also, as I recall, the FAA, this was the first time they had ever allowed someone else to build a tower.
A little tricky, at a major tower like this, to turn that construction over to an airport. But that actually was very interesting because we had to gain their trust because they had their own way of doing it, which was a prescriptive criteria of limiting the deflection of the tower during an earthquake, and they felt if they could limit that, they would get the behavior of the building they wanted. It was shown to them after a while that they would get the behavior of the building to that would satisfy that criteria, but it would not be what they wanted from an operational perspective. And it was because of the partnered model where we had a concept engineer as well as a design build engineer, where they were able to marry up with the FAA, and we were able to build a team that was able to listen to the FAA, and the FAA trusted the airport and our consultants on what they were saying, that this exploration was also allowed to occur, because it could have easily been said, that's our mandate, I don't really care, just do it. And in the end, both parties would have felt really bad because it would have been the wrong solution.
It's also an extraordinary looking building as well.
It is a very interesting building.
Yes. Yeah. Google that, everybody. We'll put a picture in the show notes. So I know that you've been involved with structured collaborative partnering too. So what role do you think it plays in progressive design build?
Well, interesting is that one of the things that's been really fun for me over a long period of time, and Sue's been along my journey the whole time through partnering, both the good and the bad times, because I'm one who likes to see things morph into the next step. And I'm always an interesting character when we move into different things. Let's start with structured collaborative partnering in the way that it maybe served a purpose 10 years ago. We were in a journey to avoid disputes or resolve disputes, and it became more of a way to not address extraordinary, but to survive without ending up in court. Partnering, when we began a progressive design build model here, partnering began to come into progressive design build to achieve extraordinary results, hence the term exceptional project outcome. When we began it on the Terminal 2 project, I don't think we totally understood how that was going to happen. We took a lot of the old ways of doing business, but we began to see the beginnings of it occur, and we meandered through that process. One of the things on the Terminal 2 project as we incorporated partnering is we saw extraordinary results in the team working together as one team through the design process. And we saw that execute through construction and develop a wonderful facility. What came out of that, though, is what could we have done better? And one of those areas that we could have done better is, well, we can have the design builder on earlier before we even start design. Instead of why have any documents prepared and any program prepared, but what if we just start with literally a blank sheet of paper? Well, so we started to do the blank sheet of paper. Oh boy. Just when you think you're giving everybody their freedom, you actually lock everybody down because they don't know what to do with a blank sheet of paper because everybody just wants to go, 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 go. There's nothing you can do to fix that go, 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 and what do I do, and why is all this chaos? No contract's going to fix that. No process of lean construction is going to fix that. But a structured collaborative process will fix that. And the way that it operates in that mindset and establishes the norm that that team will use all the way through design and construction is that it helps identify issues that are stumbling blocks for completing the program. In essence, what begins to happen is that in the team's heads, as they begin to lay out this collective wisdom on the table, becomes the conflicts that begin to occur. What's interesting about those conflicts is that they just start to cause the programming phase to stall a little bit. But really, there's no clock ticking and no money being expended or anything. So there really are no problems occurring. And through partnering, you're able to have the workshops where these conflicts can rise up naturally because you've removed all the other obstacles. But if you didn't have a setting that was committed to just that one issue, they never would get into an open forum where everybody can see them. And so partnering gets these issues to the table. But you're still not off the hook. Because as the rest of the team begins to develop these issues, they can't leave till they make commitments to each other of how they're going to deal with those issues or conflicts. And because nobody's been hurt in all this, as I mentioned earlier, and the energies are to get programming back on track because they really want to get to design, they begin to make commitments to each other and begin to hold each other accountable. I don't even have to hold them accountable. They hold each other accountable, which is a great place to be. But if we didn't have the setting of the idea that you're building an alliance of one team, not an alliance of three separate teams, but one team, there's no way that could ever happen because the bottom line is that most of these issues that come up in programming affect design, construction, and stakeholders. And unless those come into alignment in that programming phase, you're not going to figure it out in design. But you also just need that partnered environment, that alliance environment, that you're all going to be in this together at some point. You might think as a builder, oh my God, that's eons away. Yeah, but you inherit whatever comes out of that resolution of that conflict. And by the way, you can be part of that solution here up front. Same thing with the design. You might be saying, when the basis of implementation is all completed, then I'll come and worry about it. But you have this opportunity to resolve it now before you actually start your work. And so there begins the beginnings of partnering. The next aspect as you go through the design phase is that it's not over. The conflicts aren't over yet. And there's still positive things to come out of all those conflicts. And partnering continues what you establish as the norm in programming right into design and ultimately into construction. Yes, things get easier and easier and easier along the way from a pure issue identification issue. But you still need this underlying idea that we have a partnered alliance, and you still have to have a structure around that. I'll be the first one to admit that we are still, just like progressive design build, we're still trying to understand the model through all the different realms it goes through. I think partnering is evolving too, and it will continue to evolve. As I mentioned, it used to be almost a dispute resolution tool. That's a far cry now, where we're using it as a tool to not only have teams collaborate and integrate. That's really not its primary purpose. It's really how to give everybody the safe zone to go to a greater place. And that's still uncharted territory to all of us. And we're learning as we go through this and take this journey back to the way we used to do buildings. But if you don't have that model of some structure around it, it's left to its own devices, chaos will go unfettered and it won't get organized. And that can breed havoc too. So it adds that organization structure to bring collective wisdom and issue identification to the nozzle.
So I like to ask everyone this question. Not everything has been hunky-dory wonderful all the time on every project. Take us back to maybe your biggest failure, disaster, frustration moment on a project, And tell us about that.
Interesting enough, I think one of the biggest disappointments I ever had, without calling out names, was, and it was a challenge, was on a particular project here at the airport a long time ago under a design bid build model, was the quality of the work. And on this particular building, I don't want to call them out, it was always hard to get the quality of work completed. And in fact, there were a lot of times along the way that says, oh, we'll come back and we will fix those things. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. And that was always frustrating to me because quality was one of those things that is hard to just point at and say, well, contract says do this. But everybody on the team knows what it looks like when you say it for the most part, within reason. And I think one of the biggest disappointments I ever had is working with a builder who then ended up with a gigantic punch list. And I had one of the executives come out with me. And I was curious about the first issue I brought up in the punch list. And I said to them, I'll tell you what, here's the first one we're going to run into. And this kind of determine where we're going to go from here. You tell me if that one should be on the list or off the list. And of course, I knew really well that this particular weld item on this rail on the staircase should be something that was just horrible, should be redone. And the answer to me was, looks fine to me, let's take it off the list. And I just thought to myself, wow, this is punch list. We've been through a journey of 3 years on a project, and that's where we're at. And that's incredibly frustrating. Even putting up with the promises that we would fix everything and not fighting it. That was very frustrating to me and very disappointing.
So what did you learn?
Well, what I learned about that is that the problem can't be fixed at the end. But I also learned, too, that this fell apart because I had an expectation, but it wasn't in alignment. And I talked about, I would enforce, my expectation as communicated really was, we'll just fix it later. What I really should have said and what the alignment was really off is it should never have been done that way in the first place. But that requires that conversation way up front. And what I really learned about is because that was going to become an issue with me, I waited till it became a problem. And it goes back to this whole understanding of where I'm at on this journey is that we really have to have those tough discussions early and often and have them from the very beginning. And that's where, partnering is best at the very beginning. It's not meant to come in after the dispute has happened. Yes, it helps a little, but it's most effective if it happens at the very beginning. And we align those expectations up front. And I think that's incredibly important. The other thing, too, a simple journey that I went through on that, and there's been other things, too, that I learned is that we talk about risk transfer. And I don't think risk transfer is really something that we should have in anything we do in this world because you can't transfer risk to somebody that can't do anything about it or quantify it. People are willing to take on risks that they can manage and handle. So wouldn't it be more important to focus on that alignment of expectation, like I talked about on the quality, if we aligned that expectation way up front and everybody committed to it, then we wouldn't have to worry about risk transfer because we have the alignment and people would take on what they're willing to take on as their core business and do it. And then all our problems go away. So we don't really have to transfer the risk. It's not transferred, it's taken on by somebody willingly. What a great place to be.
Absolutely. It sounds wonderful. So shifting a little bit, just a little bit more about you, I like to ask everyone also, what's the very best advice you have ever received?
I know what my best advice was. It was from my mom. I forgot. The best advice was to marry my wife. It was, you've waited long enough, get on with it.
And you did.
And I did. And here we are 34 years later.
That's awesome.
The best professional advice I've ever gotten goes way back to my day at the very beginning of my job when I was out of school. I just gotten my degree, was going to be all that as an engineer, and ran across my first issue that occurred out in the field that came via back in those days there weren't RFIs, but there were these quips and these questions that would come back, and looking at the question and realized that I got myself into a problem with the design. And I thought, oh, well, I'm so smart. They've already built this thing, and I can figure this way out of it, and I can do all that. And I had my boss hang over my shoulder and goes, there's an easy way out of this one. And I said, oh, there probably is, but it's going to take me time to figure it out. And he said, there's an easy way out of this. And I said, okay, what's the easy way out of this one? Go out to the field and talk to the person who actually has to do the work, and they'll tell you how to fix it. Really? I'm going to go out to the field and talk to the person that's out there building it, and they're going to tell me how they don't know anything about engineering. Well, I went ahead and did that. It was less than a 1-minute conversation until there was a fix, because they knew exactly what to do. One, because they knew how to build it. Second, they had already been there before, and I wasn't the first engineer who had screwed up on a particular thing. And the reason why I found that advice so profound is because it was really my first experience to collective wisdom, and that we all bring something to the table that's unique. And I didn't understand that at the time, and so it was something I could think back on, well after the fact. But I realized how powerful that particular conversation was on how to fix my own mistake, and I realized that I couldn't do it by myself. But it took that advice and then that follow through to go ahead and do that. And that's why the partnered model and this alliance of bringing everybody in to this idea of one single common purpose of extraordinary outcomes is so powerful, because we sometimes think that we can fix everything all by ourselves. It takes a team to do it, and that was a perfect example of it. And I saw that work for me, just even though it only involved 2 people at the time. It was still a team of 2, mostly 1, and I wasn't on that team, but I got on that team.
So I also like to ask everyone about a resource or something like a gift to the listeners, something where people could learn more about what you're talking about, or maybe a favorite book that you have that you would like to share with everyone.
I think one of the best books I've ever read, and it was an easy, fairly straightforward read. It was recommended by a previous director here at the airport. And it was simply a book called Getting to Yes. And that was it's a very easy read, but I think it's something that really gets to the core of our profession. There used to be a running joke in our business, say that, we're in the problem-solving business when we're in architecture, engineering, construction. Business is really good. Well, if we're in the problem-solving business and we really love the problem-solving business, why do we spend so much time finding a way to know? And this really is a great book in that it transforms your way of looking at things and looking for the cans instead of the cannots. And what was really profound about that book, and although it didn't directly say this, it references, is that the cannots are finite, but the cans are infinite. Wouldn't you rather work in a world of infinite than limited resources? And that was an incredible insight to focusing your attentions on yes, because it's a whole lot easier really to get to yes than it is to no. And so stop with the no, I can't do that. Stop. Yep, we can do this. And then start looking at all the options. Because if you're looking for no, you'll find no real fast, and you'll stop and won't look at anything else. But with the cans, boy, the list is long. You just got to look there. And it's easy to do.
So how can people contact you?
So I'm available on LinkedIn. So you can just type in Geoff Neumayr, and I'm sure you'll find me on LinkedIn. I'm not a big social person, so that is about the only place you will find me on the internet. I'm also, you can find my email address. I'm also on the board of directors for the Design Build Institute of America. So if you need to access me, you can go to the website there and they will direct you to me. And you can also get hold of me through my email. My email is Geoff, Geoff, Neumayr, Neumayr, @flysfo.com. And that's a great way to get hold of me too. And all 3 of those mechanisms are great ways to get hold of me.
So what's your parting advice to the construction nation so that tomorrow, when they get up and they go to their project, they can implement something that will move them towards developing the integrated, high-trust, collaborative team?
The best thing you can do every single day is take one thing and try to do it better today than you did it yesterday. And remember that the only way you can get to tomorrow is to get through today. So make today better than yesterday, and you will get to tomorrow.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Geoff, for being with us today. I think this is just going to be a great episode. So everyone out there in Construction Nation, please share this with your team. Talk about these concepts and ideas so that you can begin to implement them on your team, because construction teams don't just happen, they have to be built. And so why not share this episode with your team so they can help you? The more people you have helping, the faster you can build your construction dream team. And while you're at it, go on over to Construction Dream Team and subscribe to the podcast. Now, I can't tell you how many people have told me, "What's a podcast, Sue?" Well, it's much easier now because if you have an iPhone, Siri's got your back. All you have to do is press the button, say, "Hey Siri," and subscribe or play Construction Dream Team, and Siri will do it for you. So there you have it. No excuses. Got to be listening to the podcast. And you can actually listen to any of them that way or go back to any episodes and listen that way. If you do listen, please give us a 5-star rating. It's pretty easy to do. Just scroll down a little bit and you'll see the stars. Click on the farthest one on the right and you've given us a 5-star rating. That helps us with the search engine so that more people in Construction Nation can find us. Remember, we drop a new episode every Monday morning at 4 a.m. Pacific time. So join me next week when I will interview another industry leader or expert about the people side of construction so you can learn how to create your construction dream team. Thank you, Geoff, so much for taking time to talk with us.
How exciting. Thank you very much, Sue, for having me.
And thank you, Construction Nation, for listening. I will catch you next time.